Welcome here into Teal The Show. We've got Frank Frangie in the building. The Jaguars are back from the bye week. Frank, it's time for the home stretch of the season. We've reached that point.
And you know what? And I think it's a home stretch where you're rested a little bit too, Jamal. You know, this is a team that needed to kind of catch their breath a little bit. And it was, Doug talked about it before the break. They needed a little time off. It was a long stretch of games. It was 2 weeks in London, some really good teams after London. They can catch their breath a little bit. It's a home stretch. I'm excited to see how they do now with the week off behind them. I really am.
All right, week off is behind them, and Trevor Lawrence back out on the practice field. So Trevor had missed the Jaguars' last 2 games before the bye week, and then also get a little rest over the bye week. Trevor Lawrence back out on the practice field. Doug Peterson says he's not ready to say that Trevor's going to be ready to go this week. Might need a day or two. Has to get back on Wednesday, get the doctors to check him out and see how he's doing. But it's a good sign, Frank, that Trevor Lawrence was back there out on the practice field, able to get some throws in.
Well, here's one thing I think it does put to rest. The thought about, well, he's just going to shut it down and go have surgery. They're 2-9. Don't worry about the rest of the season. Go worry about next year. Well, that's obviously not the case, because that was the case, Jamal. He wouldn't have been at practice today. The fact that he went out there and is trying to give it a go tells you what we already knew about Trevor. He wants to play, man. He wants to play with his partners. He wants to play with his teammates. Those guys are in that locker room together, and they're fighting through this 2-9 season. I think if at all possible, Jamal, the last thing Trevor wants to do is say, you guys go handle it. I'm going to go have surgery. He wants to play, and he wants to be with his teammates. I love that about him. Now, whether he can or not, we'll find out. But he's trying to play, and I love that. I really do.
You know, Doug Peterson was talking about being a coach and only having so many at-bats, so many days that you're going to get an opportunity to do that. Players kind of look at it the same way. There's only so many games that he's going to have in his career. He doesn't want to miss any of them because of an injury, if he can avoid it. What would having Trevor back out there on the field mean? But obviously, it would mean Mac Jones doesn't get the start. But just having your leader, your quarterback back out there, it has to give a lift to the team.
Yeah, I think you're all over it. I think everything you're saying is exactly right. Number one, he's the better of the 2 players. That's why he's the starter. That's no knock on Mac, but your starter is the better player. He's the one that's more familiar with his teammates. They're more familiar with him. So having your starter out there, who I think is a good player, matters. But you hit it. He's the leader. He's going to be. He's signed up for a long time now, Jamal. He's going to be the leader of this franchise for a long time. Those teammates have to see him out there battling through it, finding a way to play. I love that about him last year. Look, last year he had an ankle and a knee and a shoulder, and he was in concussion protocol. That's 4 different injuries, but he still tried to get out there and play, and that's who he is. I think the fact that he's trying to play, whether he does or not, he's going to, if he can, he will. This speaks volumes to the relationship he has with those players and how those players feel about Trevor Lawrence.
We'll get a feel later on in the week if Trevor Lawrence will be able to go out there on the field against the Houston Texans. It's going to be a big game for the Jaguars. The Texans are coming off a tough loss against the Titans. Frank, this just shows how, I guess, much parity there is in the AFC South. I mean, technically, Frank, the Jaguars aren't out of it yet. They're still in the playoff race, at least mathematically.
You know, it's interesting, Jamal. You wonder if you've dug too big of a hole for a late season run to matter in the standings. It's going to matter because finishing strong always helps you the next year and always helps you feel good and helps you sell tickets and the whole bit. But you wonder if they've dug too big a hole. They're 2-9. Gosh, if they were even 4-7, if they had found a way to win 2 of those close ones and they were 4-7, the Texans are reeling a little bit. The Texans have a brutal schedule the rest of the way. The Jags schedule isn't nearly as hard on paper now as it was earlier in the year. So yeah, you could see a run coming. You just hope they haven't dug too big of a hole before that run comes. But I think the Jags are going to win some games down the stretch.
We'll talk about those games down the stretch coming up next when Teal The Show returns right after this quick break. All right, welcome back here into Teal The Show. Frank, the Jaguars have a handful of games left on the schedule. Now, honestly, on paper, it looks like a very winnable schedule. You got maybe a tough game against the Texans, but you got a couple of games against the Titans, who have been a struggling team. There's a chance that the Jaguars could stack a couple of wins here, something that they've really struggled to do so far this year.
A big part of it is, who are the Jaguars? We have thought all along, not just you and me, but I think people in this local media, some people in the national media, certainly people associated with the team, that it's a team that's better than their record. We felt that way all along. Now, the Detroit game was a tough loss, but there have been some real close ones. But at some point, you are what your record says you are. That's the old cliche, right? So if they're what we think they are, and a better team than their record, and I do believe that, Jamal, if they are that, a team that's better than they have played and better than they have looked, then you know what? They are going to win some of these games. There's some winnable games along the way. but they've got to play better. They've got to block better, like Doug said in his presser today, get back to some of the things they did well earlier. If they do that, they've got a chance. But they've got to be the team we think they are and that they think they are. They've got to play better. That part is for sure.
It might take a small miracle for the Jaguars to make a run toward the playoffs, but they technically are still in the playoff picture. They could be eliminated officially as early as this weekend with a loss to the Texans, plus some other things that would have to happen along the way, Frank. But we've seen back in 2022, technically there was like a 1% chance that the Jaguars would make the playoffs that year. All of a sudden, the pieces fell into place, and there they were sitting in the playoffs. Technically, it could happen, I guess, any given Sunday, right?
Well, here's win the next game. How many times have we said that? Win the next game. If you win the next game, you've now split in the division with the first place team, the Texans. They won there. You will have won here. You've got another win. You feel a little bit better about yourself. They've lost 4 of 6. If they lose this game, that's 5 out of 7 that they've lost, so they'll be a reeling franchise. And yeah, you've got the Jets who look like they've given up. You've got the Raiders who just lost Gardner Minshew. You've got 2 games against the Titans who've had a tough season before beating the Texans on Sunday. Yeah, you've got some winnable games here. So win the next game and see where you are. Look, Jamal, it's a long shot. It's the longest of long shots to come back from 2-9 and make the playoffs. But win the next game. Keep winning the next game and see where they are. They've caught their breath. They had their off week. Let's see what happens now that they've had that, and now they play a team at home that they've certainly beaten here before.
Take it one day at a time, 1 week at a time. All right, Frank, during the bye week, a lot of fans wanted to see things change. We talked about that last week during Teal the Show. No changes made. What would a run down the stretch mean for the future of Doug Peterson and Trent Baalke? I know it's tough to say, but you got to feel like that would give them some sort of security, something they'd like to see as well.
Well, I do think this. I do think Shad Khan, by not making a move here, has sent the message that he's going to evaluate this thing as a whole, Jamal, not just one bad game or a handful of bad games. The message I took from him, and who knows, he hasn't said anything, but the message I took out of this is, hey, we're going to evaluate all of it together. We're not going to pick one game or one stretch of games. When it's all over, we'll take a look. So if that's the case, yeah, finishing with 4 wins in your last 5 games or whatever it is would help. I don't know what's going to happen with the front office. I don't know what's going to happen with Doug or Trent. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think anybody does. I don't know if Shad knows what he's going to do yet. But as long as the decision hasn't been made, or at least not been made publicly, go play better, win the next game and see. You got to believe if they finish strong, that helps their case. Now, the people that want people fired don't want to hear that. But again, if he hasn't decided yet, and publicly he hasn't, then every game you win's got to help the cause. It has to help the cause.
All right, Frank, what's your gut tell you? How many games do you think they can win down the stretch, or they finished the year with?
Yeah, that's the question, right? I'd like to tell you I think they're going to win 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 6 or whatever the rest of the way. I'd love to believe they're going to win 5 of their last 6 games. It's hard for me to say that now. I think they're going to get a few here, Jamal. I don't think they're going to finish the season with 2 wins. I really don't believe that. I also don't know that I think they're going to get to 8 and 9 and win the rest of them. So my guess is they're going to finish no worse than in that 4 or 5 win spot from where they are now. And if they get hot, it could be a run like 2 years ago. I haven't discounted that. But if you ask my honest opinion, my guess is they get to 4 wins or 5 wins by the time the season's over. Watching them and seeing where they are now, that'd be my guess.
Looking at everything as a whole, that would be a gut punch to this locker room to finish the year with that sort of win total, and probably picking at the very least in the top 5 of the draft. Not just to the coaching staff, but to the players that had high expectations.
Yeah, and I think the first 11 games have been a gut punch, Jamal. Nobody thought 2 and 9. Look, they pick first in the draft right now. Nobody saw that coming. They all know that. But you can't control those first 11 now. They're behind you. How do you do in these last group of games? I'd love to see them win all of them. We'd love to see them win 6 games. I'd love to see them win 5 out of 6. And I believe they have the personnel to do so. I believe they've got the right plan. This team got hot 2 years ago. It was only 2 years ago. It wasn't 22 years ago. It was 2 years ago they got hot after the break. I could see it happening, but it's hard, at least as I sit here right now, it'd be hard to predict that.
All right, Frank, if they were going to pull off the unthinkable, pull off the miracle and go on this run, and you could make one change to make it happen to what we've seen from the early part of the season, does any one change that you think might flip the switch and be the difference come to your mind?
I don't know if it's a personnel change or a scheme change or a who calls the plays change, if that's what you're looking for, Jamal. That's internal stuff. Sure. I'd rather talk about an area that needs to play better. How about that? I would love to see the defensive interior play better. I don't think the offensive line's been great. But I think the interior of the defensive line for me has been the biggest disappointment. That's an area that has struggled. I think as good as Josh Hines, Allen, and Trayvon Walker are, they're not getting much help in the middle. I really don't think so. So I think quarterbacks have a lot of time to play, a lot of time to throw. You double team the ends, you chip a little bit, and the interior guys aren't making much of a difference. So if there's one thing that they could do better on the field to help them go on that run, Jamal, it's I think the defensive tackles have to play better, get a better push up front, stuff the line against the run, help those ends. That's what I'd like to see change maybe more than anything else.
You know, the big guys at the line of scrimmage, we've said it before, they never get enough love, Frank. They're not the guys that sell jerseys, but old football coaches will tell you the game's won and lost at the line of scrimmage. And the Jaguars right now on that defensive side of the football, that interior line could definitely play better. I am right there with you, Frank. They could use some improvement there. We'll see what happens down the stretch. Jaguars still have a handful of games left, and there is always hope until you're completely eliminated. The Jaguars are not eliminated. We've seen them pull off the miracle before. We'll see if maybe Doug Peterson can pull one more rabbit out of the hat. All right, Frank, thanks for being here. Thank you at home for tuning in. Since we won't see you again before Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Good night, and go Jags.